and welcome to this episode of Sales Secrets from the Top 1%, where the world's best sales experts share their secrets to sales success. And I am thrilled, honored, humbled, and grateful to have with me today my good friend Scott Ingram. Scott is the founder of Sales Success Media, where he hosts two of my favorite sales podcasts, Sales Success Stories, where he deconstructs world-class sales professionals, and his second podcast, Daily Sales Tips, where he delivers a new sales tip to B2B pros in 5 to 10 minutes per day, every day, 7 days a week. Scott is not only an entrepreneur running the Sales Success Media company, he's also the account director full-time at Relationship One and a mentor for thousands of sales professionals. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited for this.
Brennan, it's great to be here. It's good to be on the other end of an interview with you.
Yeah, it's so funny because Scott runs a top sales secret interview podcast where he interviews the top one at top1.fm. And, you know, you had me on the podcast and we interviewed, and I was like, dude, it's funny because I'm doing the same thing, but a different format. And you're like, dude, it's really hard. Watch out. Be careful. And here you are. You've got like all the episodes. You've got the 2 books. It's incredible. And you're still mentoring us and me from afar. I appreciate you, man. But you interview everyone. Now it's time for us to interview you. You know?
Good. It's fun to be on the other end every now and then.
Yeah. So, you know, you've had a wild career. You know, I want to hear about the audience, why we're all tuning in, Scott. We want to hear 2 things. Number one, how'd you get started in sales? And what are all the sales secrets you've learned throughout your career selling, right? Like the one secret at each of these places that leveled you up or knocked you down to level up, to go on to the next thing, to make more money, make more sales, make more income, you name it. And then towards the end of the interview, we want to know, if you had to go back in time to your 20-something self, just starting out in sales, what would be your number one tip to maximize revenue and increase sales today to make more money? So really excited to just kick off this interview with learning about how you got started in sales and where this whole thing started from.
Yeah. So the very first sales role, like so many people, I'm an accidental sales professional. I started my first company when I was 20 years old in Southern California in Orange County. And for Breaking Bad fans, this was wild for me to discover years later, but the name of that company was Gray Matter Technologies. And so that was a big part of Breaking Bad. If you're not a fan, it was pretty interesting to discover that later on, because I literally didn't even get into Breaking Bad until the last season. It sort of binged all the way through, and it was just a fascinating discovery.
Good. It's such a good show, by the way.
Yeah, it is good. It's addictive. Like it's one of those, don't start if you don't have the time, because you're going to want to get into it, which is why I don't start a lot of those series. But that company was an IT consulting company. And I learned really, really quickly that you don't really have a company if you don't have clients, and you don't have clients unless you figure out how to sell. So I don't know if that's the secret, right? That was really the challenge was, oh my God, I understand the technology side of what I'm trying to do. I don't understand how to do the sales side of what I'm trying to do. So I spent 5 years building that company and developing myself and really recognizing that this is probably the most important part of the company. Right, is of course the way that we deliver the service and all of that stuff matters. But again, if you're not selling, you're not doing anything. And probably the secret there.
And what type of IT? Like, how did you start this? Was it like you were good at fixing computers, so then you help people fix? Like, how do you get started starting an IT consulting company?
Gosh, you know, this is such a long story, and we have so much more ground to cover. The short of it is, you know, at the time, this is, you know, over 20 years ago, at the time, a traditional career path, if you were interested in technology, was to go down a computer science degree sort of pathway.
Right. Yep.
And my math grades were not quite where they needed to be to follow that sort of a path. But computer networking was becoming a really big deal. So I actually I became a Microsoft certified systems engineer. And so I developed and got a lot of training around it. And of course, I had built all sorts of computers for friends and myself and all of that kind of thing growing up. So getting into networking, that's kind of how that started. And, it was the old days of, hey, once you get this certification, you'll be good to get a $50,000 a year job, which at that time was, oh my God, that was like more money in the world. That'll be fantastic. Yeah. And then you come out with your piece of paper and I'm like, cool, awesome. Where's my job? And they're like, yeah, you don't have any experience. And so again, just a complicated pathway and the right relationships. And this is the secret. The secret from that whole experience is relationships are powerful. It's how I got into this and created the company, right? Because I had an opportunity, my very first client, I had an opportunity to consult with actually my childhood school district. And nice. They had a brand new head of IT. And he's like, great, we could really use the help. What do you charge? And I think I told him like $20 an hour, $25 an hour. And he just took me under his wing. He's like,
a number.
Well, I had no idea. I didn't know anything about like self-employment tax and how much this was going to cost me and all of that. He's like, yeah, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. And he took me under his wing. He really became one of my very first mentors. He had just come out of consulting and he really explained the business to me. It was like, look, man, you're going to have all of this other overhead. There's no way you can charge $20 an hour. So I looked at him and I said, oh, okay, so $75 an hour? He said, correct. And he hired me. And that's really how it started. And where the relationships really came in at the end, I was engaged to be married. We had decided to move to Austin. So I was basically cashing out of Southern California in 2004. And I was like, well, I have this company. I need to sell a company. I made 3 phone calls and sold the company because I had the relationships, right? Wow. So that has been a core theme throughout everything that I have done. It's how I've developed new client relationships, but also those mentors, right? The
sales secret there was building that kind of like right relationships and mentors to take you to the next level, guide you down the right path per se.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? And you need different mentors at different points, and you need different kinds of mentors, right? Again, starting your own company, there were so many things I had no freaking idea what I was doing, and just getting involved in the community and getting involved in chambers of commerce and Rotary clubs, and I did so much stuff. It was ridiculous, but I was able to find people that I'd been doing this for several months. I was able to find people who'd been doing this for 20 and 30 years to guide me. And I think people see when you have that level of hustle and you want it, man, people want to help you. They want to bring you along. I mean, I didn't even have to really work for it and ask for it in the beginning, but then I learned to, which is also powerful.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it was funny, kind of like to this tip, like, I saw you were doing the book, the type of book that I kind of wanted to do. And I reached out to you and I'm like, hey man, and you guided me and mentored me to be like, hey, this is how you do the interview book. This is how you run the podcast. Like, you coached us and then kind of gave us the roadmap. And you said, hey, Brandon, now it's up to you to go execute, right? Like, you could get the mentorship and then you just got to put it into action. What made you decide to go from, Southern California, LA area down to Austin? Just curious.
It was almost entirely financial. I saw that the market was going to come apart from a real estate perspective. It came apart for different reasons than I thought. But at the time, I mean, I had bought a condo for $162,000 in 99 and sold it for $420,000 in 2004. So 5 years, it went up to 250% or some crazy thing.
Wild.
And I had that equity. So as we were making this decision, I had that equity. There's no way to protect it. I was like, this is like hitting it in Vegas. And right. The only smart thing to do is walk the frick out the door. And that's exactly what I did. I left.
That's awesome.
I left. Yeah, well, and I picked Austin, and I've been riding another wave for the last 15 years. It's been crazy.
Yeah. Dude, awesome. I've never been. I'm dying to come because I've got a boat, and I hear the lakes out there are incredible and the weather's incredible. Okay.
The lakes are great when they've got water in them, which sometimes isn't all the time. We get some gnarly droughts.
Oh my gosh. So, okay. You head to Austin, you sell the company, you head to Austin. What's the next big thing?
Yeah, so there was some finding my way a little bit. I did some entrepreneurial things, but the piece that I think is relevant for this is I joined ADP, and that was my first true professional sales role. I went into their major accounts division, so I was selling to the major accounts is kind of a lofty term. I was selling to companies that had between 50 and 100 employees,
Yeah.
so very very SMB in
And
focus.
ADP is known to have like one of the best world-class sales training programs because they've got so many
Absolutely.
salespeople.
And that's key. It was a great program. Built some great relationships through that. I did really well, but I feel like through that whole time I never felt like it. I was making President's Club. They had this other thing called Super Starts because they have this escalating commission structure. So by the time you get to the end of the fiscal year, you're making a bunch of money, and then the year resets and you're making no money. And so they try and put some
Oh,
extra
that's
incentives
tough.
in front of you to kind of kickstart the beginning of the year. And it's stack rank. It's like the top 10%. And I made that. Again, on paper, I did well. My second daughter was born while I was at ADP, so I had a super young family. And I was taxed by the ups and downs and just how hard sales is. And the secret there is managing your mindset is critical. And I really developed skills and I learned how to manage that mindset. And for me, a lot of it's just consistent exercise. Like for me, one of the core habits I have to have, if I'm not working out consistently, I can't keep my head right. Right. If I don't work out for more than about 2 days, it is a horrible downward spiral. And so just maintaining that even keel and that consistency and really trying not to ride the roller coaster too much. Because again, sales, like there's super high highs and there are horrible low lows. And you have to know that that's going to happen. But you need to disconnect from that part of it a little bit and focus more on what do I got to do today, right? It's just getting in there and doing your job and executing.
Yeah, I love that. So managing your mindset and the consistent exercise. So was it just like all the ups and downs and the new family was just putting on like an insane amount of, I guess, stress mentally, emotionally on you, and it was just difficult to figure out how to manage it all?
Yeah, well, and I wasn't great at sales, right? It takes time to to develop this skill set. It's not something that you get overnight, right? I really think of this. I mean, I love so many of the people that have been on the Sales Success Stories podcast talk about this as a craft, right? This is something that you hone that craft and you develop it.
It's like getting an MBA or a PhD.
Sure. Or look at years
it.
ago where there were apprentice programs and you were just a slave to somebody who was a master for years, 6 years, 8 years before you became a journeyman and those kinds of things. So, I think you have to have kind of that patience. And I didn't recognize that, right? I just expected to be great and for it to come easy. And it was like, oh yeah, you know what? This takes a lot of work.
Yeah. That's incredible. And then the exercise stuff, you do it, what your secret there, you do it in the mornings, you do it in the evenings. How do you stay consistent with the exercise stuff?
Yeah, morning is the only way it can be consistent for me. So I'm a ridiculous morning person. I'm typically up at 4:30 in the morning. Right now, the way that I am thinking about, I actually work. I don't do quote unquote goal setting. I do to inform what I'm actually doing, which is habit setting. Right, I'm looking at where do I ultimately want to get, and then I'm dialing that back to, okay, what do I have to do every day or every week to actually get there? And then that's really what I'm focused on. So the way that I'm tracking my exercise this year, I got back into triathlons last year.
Oh, wow, that's amazing! Congrats!
It's awesome. And the goal this year is to do the equivalent of 10 Ironmans in training. Right. So it's a great annual goal. It's super measurable. I'm a little bit better than halfway through my first one. Right. We're halfway through January. I'm well on track. So it's a fun way to measure it. But again, for me, it's got to be that morning process first thing, because that's where my energy is, and exercising takes my energy up yet another notch. By the time the afternoon rolls around, particularly late afternoon, evening, when a lot of other folks exercise, like I'm done. It's not happening then, and it becomes too inconsistent.
That's awesome, man. Well, congrats on the triathlon. That sounds amazing. And
Yeah.
I love the 4:30 a.m. I wake up at about 4:45 too, and it's just a great time to just knock it out, get it done.
It makes all the difference, man. I mean, you get 3 or 4 hours in your day that other people don't have. Nobody calls you at 5:30 in the morning wanting something. Never happens.
Yeah, and I know Scott's not lying, because when we would email all the time back and forth, it'd be like 5:30 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. my time, because I'm at the gym responding to him. I'm like, what the hell is this guy doing out in Texas, getting back to me so early? This guy's a machine. That's awesome. So you get the mindset right, you get the exercise right, you were hitting President's Club. Kind of what happened down that track once you started getting that rhythm, and then where'd you go next?
Yeah, I actually made one of my career wrong turns, and man, we got too much other stuff to. there's a lot of story here. I had created an organization called Network in Austin, so I created this large business networking organization community, and I decided with a super young family that I was going to jump off and work on that full time. In late 2008, at the peak of the recession, it was the dumbest decision I've ever made in my life. I didn't have enough traction. There wasn't enough there. And I was trying to feed myself on a fledgling company. It was a huge mistake. And so very shortly after that, well, I don't know how shortly, I struggled through that for longer than I really needed to. But then I got on
full time. Were you doing that for, you think?
I don't know. LinkedIn would tell me. I don't remember how long.
If it was like a few years or a few months or whatever.
It's somewhere in between there. Yeah, it was probably a year or so. I mean, again, I had started it earlier. I had started it pre-ADP, and it served me well. I mean, I developed an incredible personal brand here locally. I mean, it led to, certainly had a significant impact on the success that I had at ADP, because again, I leveraged the lesson from Gray Matter, and I realized relationships are key, right? How do I start building those relationships in a place where, when we moved to Austin, I knew my real estate agent. I had one relationship. So, scaling that from scratch was a fascinating experience. And I created Network in Austin really as an answer to the challenges that I had, right, to help other people manage through that. But again, it was just a mistake. And you and I talked about this in our interview. Man, sales is the greatest thing, because you get to do all of these entrepreneurial things, but you don't have to manage all of the other stuff. You don't have to worry about HR and finance and delivery of the product and all of this other stuff behind the scenes. You just get to do what I think of as the fun part. So
the best job in the world, man. Best job.
Absolutely.
Highest earning potential with no risk, limited risk.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, I just did an interview with a 7-figure earner, and he really talked about this entrepreneurial thing. And he's like, we need to think about ourselves as our own startups, and our company is our VC, right? And they have tons of resources available for us. Like, use that and go. Right? Yeah. We talk about treating your territory like a franchise, all of those kinds of things. That's real. Like that mindset is valuable.
As a CEO and entrepreneur, I mean, at least till we get to 500 employees or whatever, like, I made 7 figures in sales as an earner, and I will never make that. And I haven't made that since growing Seamless. And I probably will never make it. Like, when you're an entrepreneur, and especially if you have investors or VCs, they'll put restrictions on you and all this jazz. Like, I'll never make what I was making as a salesperson. Now, granted, if you ever IPO or you get acquired or whatever, that's a big payday. But I get it. So when you did the networking in Austin, what was the biggest learning experience you had there? Like the secret or like failure that led to secret?
Oh, I really think of that as, I mean, a lot of people from the outside, I think it looked like a success, right? I mean, the only thing that still exists from that thing, there's a LinkedIn group with, I don't know, 15,000 people in it. But to me, it was a failure, and not what made it super hard. It wasn't an outright failure, right? It wasn't it didn't just die, and that was the end.
You probably wished it was like an outright failure, so it's like end and move on.
Yeah, that would have been great, right? It didn't. I mean, let's think about this as like if it was a person, it didn't die, and if it had died, that would have been great because it would have just been there would have been a mourning period, and we would have moved on. Instead, it was just really sick for a long time,
Yeah,
and at one point, you got to a point you're like, oh my, I just need to pull the plug on this thing. Like this is terminal. This isn't.
That's what happened with my second company in mobile. It was during the same time period, 2008. And when I wasted 3 years of my life because I didn't know how to do B2B sales. I was right out of college. It was terrible. So, but you joined after this. How do you get into one of the most badass companies in the, Oracle and Eloqua? And at that time period is where Scott went next, right? How do you get into Oracle and Eloqua from Network in Austin?
Yeah, so actually I did Bazaar Voice first. So I did another IPO before I did the Eloqua IPO. So Bazaar Voice was so I basically came to this realization. What was happening
reviews, dude, the number one platform for customer reviews, right?
That's right. So I came to this inflection point and I was like, okay, either I go raise money and extend my runway on Network in Austin and try and find this thing, or I go get a sales job. And what's funny on the fundraising side of things, I got the weirdest response. People would tell me, they're like, Scott, we believe in you. We will invest in you. We just don't see it with Network in Austin. And I'm like, well, what's wrong? And we just couldn't put our finger on it. I'm like, okay. And it was consistent. It was like really consistent messaging. I'm like, clearly something is wrong. I can't see it. People from the outside can't see it. I need to bail. And I'm like, okay, if I'm going to go back in sales, I'm going to get I'm going to be selfish and get the greatest sales job I can get. And at the time, Bazaar Voice was like the it company to work for. They were on this just incredible growth track. They
were crushing it. Because when I was selling for IBM Interactive, we partnered with Bazaar Voice. Sure. I remember working with Bazaar. This was right in that time period. Bazaar Voice was like the only major player in the so anytime that you go to a retail website and you see reviews, I think, right? You got it's powered by Bazaar Voice.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, outside of Amazon, I mean, this is what the biggest retailers and the biggest brands use, and so I joined that team and got off to just this epic, phenomenal start. I put up the best first quarter in the history of the company. It's been now a couple of years since I checked in on that, but last I checked, that record had held, and the lesson there, and I was about to say,
what is this secret? How do you go into a company brand new and you just put up possibly the largest number in a quarter ever?
You know what it was, and it comes back to a story that happened in that quarter. So the lesson is getting people bought in emotionally, and belief is game changing. And so the story there is, I mean, I was already off to a decent start with the other deals that I had in my pipeline, but I was working on an opportunity with there's only 2 or 3 of these companies in the world, so I'll narrow it down that way, with one of the largest camera manufacturers. So if you're going to buy a really fancy DSLR camera, one of those companies.
Yeah.
And, I'd been on site. We had this series of great meetings. We were on a really good trajectory. I had really painted a big vision for them that was going to put them on a path to become a 7-figure ARR client. And we were working on the first piece of that. So it was probably $350,000 a year, something like that, for the first component. Mm-hmm. And we came down to the end of the quarter. And it was just one of those things, like the timing wasn't going to work. And I remember it was, I at the time, I was actually teaching spin classes. And I remember I came out of teaching a spin class at the YMCA downtown. I'm driving into the office. My buyer is on the East Coast. So I pick up the phone, I talk to him. I'm trying to figure out kind of where we're at and how we're doing on the process and the steps. And he just, I'll never forget, I know where I was sort of driving through the hills into the office. And he's like, man, we're not going to be able to get this done in time. There's too much work internally, and just that sinking feeling of like loss and like, oh my God, I had this. This is so hard.
I had
But
this
one of the
committed
things,
to close, and now what am I going to tell my
yeah.
boss that this isn't coming through before
Well,
end of
just
year?
all of it, right? I mean, there wasn't so much of that pressure at that point because again, it was like my first legit quarter on quota, but I was like, gosh, and the culture of Bizarre Voice, the sales culture was just phenomenal, and we we were playing the Journey song "Don't Stop Believing" all the damn time, and so I get to the office, and I'm in the office at it's 7:30 in the morning at this point, and I write the most impassioned email ever. And I just sort of tell him this story about, man, it was about kind of belief and how much we believe in the success that they're going to have and this partnership that we're going to be able to have together. And I talked to him about this mantra that we have on the team about don't stop believing. And so I draft this thing, I send this email, and Brandon and this is probably 2 days before the end of the quarter. And about an hour later, I don't remember the time frame exactly, but call it an hour later, I get an email back with a 3-word response that just says, "Don't stop believing." And we got that deal done, right? He moved heaven and earth to get the legal counsel, because we haven't even negotiated the contract yet.
And there's
so we got the legal counsel in the room, negotiated everything real time, got that deal done, and they went on to become a 7-figure account. I mean, it was just an incredible story. And so again, just that transference of belief and passion and getting people emotionally bought in is incredible.
What gave you the confidence, like, to just tell him that belief, right?
I don't know where that came from, man. I don't know,
because you could have just been like, hey, all right, it's not going to happen. Fine. Whatever your name is, like, we'll work on this next week. But instead you went home and you just put that together and shot it.
Yeah. It was just kind of an inspired moment, right? It was, okay, it's early in the morning. I get to the office. Nobody else is there yet. And I'm sitting there thinking about, what can I do? There has to be something I can do. And that's just kind of what came out, and it worked, right? So I guess the corollary there is also just, you can't ever give up. Like it's never done, right? And obviously the deal wasn't dead. They didn't tell me no. It was just a no on timing.
Yeah,
right. But it
delayed.
was,
that's it.
But the timing was really, really important to us at that point. I mean, it was fiscal Q4 like that. It was a meaningful.
That's so awesome.
It was a really meaningful deal. Yeah, I mean, I qualified for a President's Club in 1 quarter. They had to change the rules because of me.
That's amazing. And I love Bizarre Voice. I mean, like, this was like one of the rocket ship golden companies. I knew Sam Decker.
Yeah.
He mentored us as we were starting to launch Seamless, and he was one of the co-founder CMOs, I believe, at the beginning.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
He's a big player in Austin with all the startups.
That's right.
So then what happens?
So then I got fired.
You got fired?
And
why?
I got fired. Well, that story. No, man. This is one place I'm gonna tease this. So in the first Sales Success Stories book, I tell the whole story, and it's one of those things I don't like to talk about it like fully publicly, just to like capture the nuance, right? I think it's important to tell the story holistically. And the piece there was, I titled that chapter in the book, and I decided in the moment as I was driving out of the parking garage for the last time with some of my stuff in a box and getting ready to call my wife to have just a freaking horrible conversation.
Yeah.
I decided in that moment, like, when I write my book, the title of this chapter is going to be called Fired Up. And that's what happened.
Nice.
That's what happened. And so I did write that chapter. That chapter is in that Sales Success Stories book. And the up, because I'm like, okay, there were parts of this that were my fault. And it took me a while to really take ownership of the parts of that I needed to take ownership of. And that's where Eloqua came next. Right. So now the opportunity, again, work in a couple of relationships, got an introduction to the chief revenue officer at the time, who became an incredible mentor. The
like,
best
after being at Bizarre Voice, were you like, I never want to leave SaaS ever again? Or like, I mean, obviously software out there was probably like huge at that 2010, 11, 12 timeframe. Like, were there other companies you were looking at besides Oracle and Eloqua, like in different industries, or no? It was like B2B SaaS.
Yeah, it was very focused on B2B SaaS, because I'd found my people, right? I mean, having been at ADP, I'd sold to HR and finance, right? There were other parts in my life where I'd
Got it. You
sold to
loved the
IT.
marketing. You loved selling the
Yeah.
marketing.
I mean,
Yeah.
once I found like selling to sales and marketing, those are my people, right? They're way more optimistic. I mean, the back end parts of the business, those folks in those roles, they're much more risk averse, and it's very CYA. And man, sales and marketing is totally the opposite, right? We're the
Yeah.
optimists. We're
Yeah.
forward looking. We believe in vision.
Opportunity everywhere.
Exactly. So I realize these are my people. So I need to be selling to sales leaders or marketing leaders. I need to be in technology because I just have such a depth of knowledge in tech, and I love tech. And so yeah, it was a pretty obvious thing. And that's another story that I tell in the book, is being really, really specific about what you want. And so I did an exercise and was able to sort of break down into about 7 bullets. Like, these are the things that I'm looking for, right? It's got to be B2B SaaS tech. It's got to be a place where I can feel like I'm making a difference, because I don't work well in really big organizations, because I know no matter what I do, I can have the most incredible performance ever. I'm still a rounding error on a rounding error when they report to the street.
Right.
So I
That's
knew
the
I
tough
wanted
part.
a smaller organization. And that process also helped not only for me to get clear in terms of what I was seeking out, it also made it a lot easier for me to communicate to my network, who is going to help me find the next gig, exactly where to focus, right? Too many people, they lose their job and they reach out to their network, and they're like, I need a job. I, I,
Right.
I, I can't help you unless I know specifically, like very,
Yeah.
very specifically, what you're looking for. So I really developed that process, got that clarity. And as soon as I got clear on that, Eloqua shows up.
That's amazing. Yeah. And Eloqua, Oracle Eloqua. Well, Eloqua probably at the time. Was this prior to the acquisition? Eloqua?
Yeah, so
Awesome.
the Eloqua story, this is IPO number 2, right? So I came in about I don't know, a year and a half before we went public. We were public
Oh,
for one
great
quarter.
timing.
We had one earnings call, and then Oracle bought us, and so I became an Oracle employee, and put up with that for 8 months or so.
I was about to say, now you're at the massive,
That's
yeah,
it.
because
That's it.
Eloqua's awesome. For those of you who don't know, marketing automation software, they compete with Pardot, they compete with Marketo, selling at IBM Interactive and Google. I relate, Scott. I loved selling to the marketers. Now I sell to salespeople and marketing, but I love selling to salespeople now. But Eloqua. So, okay, walk us through, because you were there for pre-IPO for a little while, a few years. Like, you go in there, what was the biggest secret? What was the biggest thing you learned to maximize your sales success there? How did that go?
Yeah. So as I was saying, the guy that I interviewed with, and it just had to do with the geography of the situation, because the hiring manager was in San Francisco at the time, but the chief revenue officer was here in Austin.
Oh,
So
wow. They had a
yeah,
pretty
so
big Austin office?
uh, no, we had an Austin office. There were 10 or 12 people in it,
Got it. Cool.
and so that relationship was really one of the things that I probably learned the most from. So that CRO was a guy named Alex Shootman. Alex Shootman today is the CEO of Workfront. And the best description I ever heard of Alex was from a guy who'd worked with him a couple of times. They had worked at previous companies. And he's like, Alex is a leader savant, right? The guy just oozes leadership, and whether or not it's developed or it's just naturally born, I don't know, but it's ridiculous. And he had all of these crazy Alex-isms, right? He talked about culture eats strategy for lunch. He would talk about how pipeline saves lives. But the biggest thing I took away from that
Pipeline
was
saves lives.
he had, oh, for sure. I mean, he had this mantra, and what's amazing is it was really a sales philosophy, but he elevated it so much within the organization that I still hear this mantra coming out of people that were at Eloqua at this time in totally different parts of the organization, right? From the product team and from marketers and other folks. And it was this idea of getting it done and doing it right. And what I recognized in this, and again, actually another story that I saw in the book, I didn't know I was going to be pushing the book so hard. He drew for me in our very first interview, he drew this quadrant. And it was just a 2x2 matrix with getting it done on one side and doing it right on the other. And it was this idea, and it showed me why so many sales cultures are toxic. Because if somebody's crushing it, right, they're getting it done, but they're not doing it right? They're not selling good quality deals. They're selling deals that are going to churn. They're abusing the relationship. They're abusing the organization. It's the old kind of like, I'll run over my grandmother and do whatever I need to win.
Yeah.
That creates toxic sales cultures. And Alex had the answer to this. I mean, it was absolutely freaking brilliant.
What's the answer? What's the secret?
Also in the book. No, so I'll tell you this story. So basically the top right quadrant is you're doing it right, you're getting it done, you're a star. He's like, we're going to reward you, we're going to recognize you. He's like, the bottom left quadrant is also very simple. You're not getting it done, you're not doing it right, you're probably going to be fired. This is sales,
straightforward, right?
What was really interesting is if you're not getting it done, but you're doing it right, then he's like, we believe that good things happen to good people, and we're going to coach you and we're going to work with you to get better so that you can become a star and so that you can get to the point that you're executing. But the secret sauce is in the top left quadrant where you're getting it done, right? You're putting up the results, but you're not doing it right. He wrote 2 big capital letter F's in that box and said, if that's the situation, you're going to be fired faster. And again, it's that recognition that this is, if you don't act on this, and it's so hard as a sales leader, right? Like, I want to cut off like this big chunk of revenue. That's really, really hard to do. And it was fascinating to watch. I mean, this is great talk, right? But I also saw them act on it. And so the culture that breeds, right? And the trust in leadership and to know that, man, we're doing something that matters here and we're doing it right. Like, that feeling was so empowering and important, and it was just pervasive, right? It wasn't the sales team, it wasn't even just the entire company, it was our clients, it was that community that we were building. It was unreal. It was really, really, really something special. That's
amazing. So you get mentored by him. And just for the audience, say his name again. The Workfront.
Alex Shootman.
Alex Shootman, right? Shootman. Yeah, he's and by the way, that company's got like Workfront's got 600, 700 employees now. They're crushing it.
Yep.
Incredible. So and then I assume the acquisition occurs, and you're now you never wanted to be at the big massive company, right? You're at Oracle. What happens next?
Yep. So I end up at Oracle, right? It's just sort of the natural evolution. And I had a great run and had one of another one of the favorite sales leaders I've ever worked with.
I heard Oracle's sales culture is like super aggressive, numbers. Like, you have to crush it or you're out quick. Is that true? That's what my dad always used to tell me. And that, like, that could have been way back in the day. I don't know. I heard Larry Ellison is like crazy with that stuff.
Well, it's honestly, I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because that experience is really, really different as an acquired company. And so as you're getting assimilated into kind of the Oracle process. And frankly, I was never there long enough to really see the direct impact of that. I don't think that's as harshly true as it once was. But again, for me, it wasn't the right fit long term. And somebody that I had worked with at Eloqua came calling, and he was working for a startup in San Francisco called Certain. And what was fascinating about Certain, I spent about 2 years with Certain after Oracle. I started to think back to a vision that I had based on actually an experience that I had while I was at Bizarre Voice. I went to an Austin Under 40 awards event. And just the model of the event was mind-blowing to me. They raise a ton of money off of this event. And what they do is they have about 10 different categories. So they've got legal and technology and startup and medical and all these different things. And they pick 5 finalists in every one of those categories. So you end up with this event with 50 different finalists, and they all bring a table or two to a really nice, dinner fundraiser event to support them. They pick a winner in every category, and then they pick a big winner who becomes the Austinite of the year. But it was awesome. It was a great experience, but I was just looking at the model of that thinking, oh my God, we need this in sales. Right? Like, what if we took the Fortune 500 and carved the Fortune 500 up this way? Because what I recognized then, and I still believe to be true, us sales professionals are very, very simple creatures. For the most part, we have 2 buttons that you can press. You can press the cash button, and we like when you press that very much. Please do it frequently.
Yep.
We also have a recognition button. And very rarely does the recognition button get pressed. And if you'll ask, once your cash button has been pressed enough or a certain number of times, the recognition button becomes bigger and more important. And so is this understanding that we need more recognition in this profession, right? Because if you're the number one sales professional in your company, you're probably a hero in that company. Like, people know who you are. You might be a little bit known in your industry, and outside of that, you're nobody. Even though you probably make more money, once we set stock options aside, than most of the executives in that same firm. And so I had this huge vision for this event. And so why Certain was so compelling to me is they not only did they have a software that was integrated with Eloqua, so I got to stay kind of close to my people and the relationships I had built, but they were in the event marketing space. And I went, you know what, if I'm ever going to go do that thing, and I had registered, I think I finally let this go because I've changed my mind since then, but I registered the domain name The Rainmaker Awards because I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do it like really, really, really huge.
I love it.
Right. And so I thought, if I'm serious about that, there's a lot of things I need to learn because I've never done really big events. So let me go sell for Certain and learn about this industry. And I sold CA Technologies, the platform that they use to run CA World. Right. And I learned about that event, and I sold this platform.
My dad took CA to Bill, the first B2B SaaS company to build. He was there for a decade.
Yeah.
So, I covered CA.
Absolutely.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, and I sold this platform to AT&T, and they used it to manage Pebble Beach and all of the sponsorship activities that they have around that event, and story after story, and really started to learn. But the secret from that, at the time, and I think I'm wrong now. One of my assumptions about the best salespeople, because this is also about the time, again, as I'm thinking about the Rainmaker Awards, and I'm thinking about the very best salespeople in the world. One of the common themes that I had seen among those that I had worked with through at ADP and at Eloqua and things like that, the greats are stylistically all over the place. Like, I saw very few commonalities in terms of the way that they did what they do. The commonality that I saw, though, and my sample size was just too small, was I felt like it was just kind of time in the saddle, right? There was an element of they've been in the same company, in the same role, in the same territory. They've developed this expertise and this knowledge, and they're able to kind of leverage that as one of the key ingredients. And with that assumption, I was looking at Certain and thinking, okay, how can I get to that point? Right? How can I get to that level of expertise and being known? Because what happens when you get to that place is, and if you get it done and do it right, you've got a lot of amazing relationships where you're getting good referrals to new opportunities. You've got all of your reference conversations are built in because you introduce them to clients that you've sold in the past, right? You have all of those things. And so I was thinking about, how can I get to that point without it taking just years, right? I don't want to just sit here. How do I accelerate the process? And I thought, the ultimate way, I would write a book about this space.
And
it
for
got
the
a little
audience, Certain is an event management and automation software, right? It's
That's
a
right.
software solution, just so you guys know. So Scott was selling this software solution, and it sounds like he worked with CA Technologies and other companies to deliver it to these customers like AT&T, just to give more context to the audience. And so you're seeing all these events happen from all these customers, and you see the software, and it's like creating this epiphany for you. I want to do that. And then what's the fastest way to do that? And then that leads you to thinking about this book idea.
Yeah. So I have the book idea, and I was in a mastermind group. And so I actually, I had outlined it. I was like, okay, well, what are the points? Like, what are the topics and the things that I'd want to cover? And I brought this to my mastermind, and one of the guys there, he's like, this is a really good idea, but let me introduce you to somebody. And he introduced me to a friend of his who works in the financial services space. And his model was, he had other people contribute to his books. And he's like, look, nobody says no to this, because everybody has on their bucket list that they want to write a book, but it's a big, heavy lift. It's super hard.
Terrible.
And if you can give them a way to kind of check that box without having to do quite so much work, it's super gratifying and important to them. And I went, wait a minute, I can assign people to all of these chapters that I had outlined. And so that's what I did. I went from idea to published book in 6 months. And Brandon, I joke, because this is the way that I do sales success stories too. I'm like the Tom Sawyer of authors. I wrote my last book, I don't know how much of the Making Rain book I wrote, but with sales success stories, the last one, I wrote 8% of that book. Right. So I pulled together this book called Making Rain with Events. So again, I'm also thinking about what's the ultimate brand and what am I looking to do? And I'm tying this all together. And it was incredible. Unfortunately, the biggest reason most people leave companies, right?
I've got some hunches, but tell us.
It's oftentimes because of their leader. Or their manager in this case. So I had they brought somebody in that I did not gel with and was not having a good time. And I ran into the CEO of Relationship One. We had done a lot of work together back in the Eloqua days. They were one of the key partners that I had used with some of my most successful clients. And the details behind the story are interesting, but it'll take a long time. We were basically in an environment where he recognized what was going on, and I had sent an email to kind of react to something that this manager had done. And Ron comes to me at the end of the day. He's like, Scott, look, why don't you let me buy you dinner? And I'd like to buy you like 3 or 4 drinks. And when we're done, you can delete that email and send the email that I know you'd really like to send, and I'll write you an offer letter tonight. And again, because of that experience, I was getting to sort of a low point, and I didn't take him up on that offer. We did have dinner. I had 0 drinks, and it took me another couple of months to really get to my breaking point. But it was in that moment that I remembered.
Zero drinks. Did you quit alcohol? This is something that I'm trying to quit.
No. I mean, that was more just, I knew that I was already like really amped up emotionally, and the last
didn't
thing
want to amplify it even more.
Was because I don't know what I would have what I would have done. So it was just sort of a conscious, like, no, I'm going to have water. Yeah. I do drink in a lot of moderation. I don't drink a lot. And again, it was just that I was at that super low point, and that conversation reminded me. I was like, oh, that's right. I do have value. I am really at what I do. And that's the main reason why I joined Relationship One, is they really believed not only in me, but all of these other things that I was doing. And I was very clear with them from day one, because I got quite a bit of pushback from certain with the book. That freaked them out, frankly.
Well, the sales book or the event book? Which one exactly?
The event book. So I wrote a book for them, and the reaction was like, wait, you're gonna turn this into like consulting and speaking and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, guys,
Dude,
look,
I would love to pay my people to write books.
Right. I was like, look, here's the deal.
Entrepreneur. That'd be amazing.
That's it. But again, it was just kind of a lack of understanding. And they were worried that I was going to develop some other platform. And I'm like, look, you don't understand. I have friends that speak and consult for a living, and I make quite a bit more money than they do. I'm like, the only reason I wrote this is to sell more of your software.
Right.
Like, I don't understand what the hell the hang up is here. And so when I joined Relationship One, I was very, very clear and transparent, because I was getting further along this path of what today is Sales Success Media. And I knew that I had an epiphany at about the same time, right? While I was with Certain, I was like, wait a minute, I don't have to do the big event, because here's the only reason I wanted to do the giant event was to interrogate the people that were on stage and understand what the hell they were doing. And I got super deep into podcasts and was like, wait a minute, I don't have to create that giant excuse. I can start with the interview. I can go to the very best salespeople in the world and go deep with them and have the conversation. And then at some point, if I do want to do the event, great, that'll work. So I knew at that point, as I was getting ready to join Relationship One, that's what I wanted to do. And so I was super open with them. I'm like, look, here's my path. This is what I want to do. You need to understand you're always going to be my number one priority. I am always going to achieve or overachieve what you put in front of me and ask me to do. But you need to understand that I want to be building this other thing. I have this other passion. I need to be able to do this. And if you're not okay with that, this isn't going to work. And they're all about it, right? It's really part of our culture, right? We really believe in people having balance and people pursuing passions that they're excited about.
I love that you had to throw it out there to them.
For sure. Well, it was super important, because the worst thing that could have happened is I've got this passion project that I have to do. Like at this point, it's an imperative. Like, this is not optional for me anymore. And if I wasn't allowed to do it, or was somehow shut down or repressed in that way, I knew it was just going to tear me up and drive me crazy, right? So I needed to be really intentional and find the right spot and find this support. And not once ever have they had any issue with what I've done. I mean, if anything, they've been super supportive, and it's been incredible. I mean, we send our sales team to my Sales Success Summit. I mean, it's a great deal. And again, allows me at this point in my life and career to have the best of all worlds, right? I get to carry the bag. I get to sell every day in a marketplace that I love, with clients that I love and am super passionate about.
And what is Relationship One? Oh, go ahead. Sorry. What was the last part?
So Relationship One is just a professional services firm that works within the Oracle Marketing Cloud. So I joke, my joke is, this is as close as I can be to Eloqua without having to work with Oracle.
That's hilarious.
Right. And so again, I understand who I am and what drives me and where I fit. And we talked earlier, I mean, one of my big button drivers is impact and contribution. I have to feel like I'm making a meaningful contribution. And in the 4 years I've been here, I've generated 40% of our revenue on a team of typically 4 and usually 5 people. Right. So I get to do what I love doing and show what I love doing, and at the same time have the freedom and flexibility to pursue other things that I'm passionate about. And it's just a positive feedback loop, because what do I do in that passion project? I develop relationships with some of the best salespeople in the world, and I learn stuff that I then go apply the next day.
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. I love that. And it's so funny because, I used to work, selling for Google and IBM Interactive. We also used to do like professional services for Marketo and Eloqua. And I remember using Seamless, to build the Eloqua client list, by looking at the JavaScript cookies, and then finding all the marketers at the company that was using Eloqua and Marketo, and then just calling, emailing, social selling them like crazy. That was the best time of my life. Well, second to
I was like, wait a minute, man.
Well, that was
that can't be the right answer.
That was the most money I personally made. Compared to, being in sales is amazing. What was your biggest thing that you learned when you were selling for relationship one? Or, as you're selling for relationship one now, like, what was the biggest secret that you got out of that experience, which will then take us up to your top sales secret?
Yeah. So I think it's two things. I think it's, first of all, it was really just bringing it all together, right? It was bringing together all the things that I'd learned about mindset and about belief and about getting it done and doing it right and becoming an expert and all of those things. And the other piece, because I started Sales Success Stories in the middle of that, I really saw and came to understand the value of surrounding yourself with the best, right? Through my entire career, and Brandon, I know you've heard this, I had heard the Jim Rohn quote that says, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I'd heard it for 15 years, 20 years. Never had I intentionally acted on it, right? And starting Sales Success Stories gave me that opportunity to intentionally act on it. And lo and behold, I'm having more success than I've ever had in my career because of who I surround myself with. So that I think is the real piece. It didn't really come necessarily out of the job and the role. It came out of the experience of these conversations and just taking the action to learn from the best and not just learn from. Again, it goes back to the relationships.
Yep.
Everybody, and I love that I get to share this, everybody gets to hear those interviews, but that's not ever, well, sometimes it is, but rarely is that the last conversation that I have with those folks, right? They become part of my personal board of directors, part of my they're all my mentors, and they're all uniquely different and uniquely talented in different ways. And so when I get stuck on something, I know who to call and about what, and that door is always open because I've given them a platform.
Yeah, I love that. That sounds amazing. And it sounds like bringing it all together, the mindset, the belief, becoming an expert, surrounding yourself, taking the action, has really helped you flourish at relationship one and work on your top sales project with it, which is the Sales Success Media books and events. Okay. So that leads us up to our book question. Now that we've learned all of your top sales secrets, right? And what's cool is you get to interview a lot of top sales experts and learn kind of their secrets, just like I do. If you had to go back in time, so sales secrets from the top 1%, where the world's best sales experts share their secrets to sales success. Scott Ingram, if you had to go back in time to when you first started out in sales, what is your number one top sales secret to maximize revenue, increase sales, and make more money today?
Well, let me take a little bit different tact at it, right? I think the answer here is the secret is there is no secret.
I like
it. What
it's the perfect title. The secret is there is no secret.
It's what it is, right? It is this idea. You have to recognize that sales is a craft, right? This is a long-term incremental journey that you're going to go on. And yes, there's things that you can do and you should do and you need to do to try and accelerate that journey, and reading the books and listening to the podcasts and going to the events like the Sales Success Summit and surrounding yourself with greatness are all going to help. But at the end of the day, it's the actions that you take to implement those things that you're learning, the quote unquote secrets, if that's the way that you want to think of them, and just going through the exercise day after day and trying to get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. And once you compound that over 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you're really going to have something. I really don't think that there's a lot of things that like right this second, if I do this thing from a tactical perspective, is going to make that big of a difference in the long term. I'm much more interested in what does this lifetime journey look like? What's this lifetime value to you and to yourself to take ownership of your own development, your own results, your own success, and know that, you know, this is a process. It's this incremental process where you're just going to chip away, chip away, chip away, chip away. And at some point, I'm not there yet, but at some point, maybe you turn into a diamond.
Wow. I love that. That compounding interest, going through the exercise day after day, the routine, the repetition, the habits. Talked about earlier, you got to build the habits, the health habits, the mind habits, the sales habits.
All of it.
I'm in a constant, I completely agree that 24/7, like habits, like I'm experimenting with all different types of habits in sales and health, everything, every day. That it's almost like a lifestyle sales change almost. Wow, man, that's amazing. So the secret is there is no secret. Sales is a craft. You have to be working on your craft every day, from reading books, attending conferences, studying, learning, creating the habits, the actions that you take every day, and going through the exercise. And you get that compounding effect to one day get to that diamond in the rough that's worth a lot of money, that makes a lot of money. That's amazing. Scott Ingram, thank you so much for joining us today on Sales Secrets from the Top 1%. Where can the audience learn from you, connect with you, follow you for more?
Yeah, the best place to start, where you'll find just about everything, is top1.fm. That's the number one. So TOP, the number 1.fm. And one of the things you can do on there is, if you'll jump on the listener list, so hopefully you'll check out one or both of the podcasts. As soon as you do that, I will send you any video that you want from the most recent, as folks might be listening to this in the future. So call it from the most recent Sales Success Summit. And again, just powerful, powerful content. And every single person that's on the stage at that event has been on the podcast, and the only way they're on the podcast is they are the number one active quota-carrying individual contributor in their company.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's a great show. I've listened to a ton of the episodes. Scott, how often do you come out with a new episode for the interviews?
Yeah, so the new interview episodes are every other week. But what I've been doing in those in-between weeks is we've been sharing sample stories from the books. I've actually just recently started sharing some of the presentations from previous Sales Success Summits. So it's nonstop value every single week on that show. And then if that's just too long, because those episodes can get meaty, the one that I've got coming next week is an hour and 45 minutes. It is seriously epic stuff. So I created the opposite show in Daily Sales Tips that is every single day and never more than 10 minutes. Typically it averages about 5 minutes. So very, very digestible, quick, great ideas, something that you can put into action today.
I love that, man. Thank you so much, Scott. For those tuning in, make sure you head to top1.fm, subscribe, learn more, connect, sign up for the newsletter so you get those updates. And thank you, audience, for your time today. Remember, the secret is there is no secret. You got to take action. You got to build the habits. You got to build the compounding interest. And to get this chapter in the book, to follow, to listen to this podcast over and over again, go to secretsalesbook.com, secretsalesbook.com, secretsalesbook.com. You can tune in to YouTube. You can tune into iTunes, everywhere where there's any audio content. And you can pick up a copy of the book there at secretsalesbook.com, secretsalesbook.com. And thank you again. Stay tuned every week, twice a week, for new episodes, and we will talk to you soon. Good luck. Go out there and make it happen.